Okay. Hi, everyone. How you doing?
Hello.
Welcome to our LinkedIn Live session on the CalleoHealth Code, Cracking the Healthcare Innovation Genome, Strategic Insights from the Front Lines of Change. And today we're excited to showcase CalleoHealth, an organization renowned for its innovative approach to bridging global healthcare startups with the U.S. market. Through a robust network and deep industry expertise, they support healthcare startups from the MVP stage to full commercialization, facilitating crucial connections with key U.S. healthcare organizations. Leading the charge at CalleoHealth is Avi Rosenzweig, CEO, who brings over 2 decades of invaluable experience in the healthcare sector. Under Avi's leadership, CalleoHealth not only navigates but also shapes the landscape of healthcare innovation with strategic foresight and expert guidance. CalleoHealth offers an extensive array of services, including business development, sales strategies, healthcare economics modeling, and market research. The comprehensive support system is designed to propel customers to new heights, ensuring that each partnership leverages opportunities for substantial growth and success in the competitive healthcare market. On the U.S. healthcare front, CalleoHealth helps healthcare organizations identify the innovations, technologies, and solutions that will best solve their current challenges. We have with us today on our panel, Avi, of course, the CEO, Dolev Melamed, the VP, and we have Sarah Ellis, VP of Business Development and Customer Success, and Mark Miles, VP of Sales and Operations. Thank you all for joining us. Okay, we're going to jump right in. We have a half an hour, and I guess I'll start off with some questions, and we'll take some questions from the audience. But before we do that, I'll also tell you, please feel free to jump in with anyone who wants to respond to any of these questions. Just want to have a nice open dialogue, and feel free to join us as we proceed. So I guess the first question is going to be, what do you feel are some of the most intricate challenges for startups in the healthcare industry today? And specifically, how is CalleoHealth addressing these challenges?
So yeah, great question, Steve. First of all, appreciate you having us on. Why
One
am I
second, please. I'm
doing?
sorry. We're having some feedback, guys. Avi, I don't know if it's, you might want to, there you go. Okay,
I think I fixed it. I apologize. Hopefully.
there you go. No problem at all. Now we hear you clearly.
Yeah, sorry. So I think in general, first of all, thank you for having us on. We really appreciate the opportunity.
My pleasure.
As we speak kind of generally about startups, the first challenge always is funding. Funding is a challenge for every startup throughout the world. How do you raise the funds? How do you convince investors? Specifically in healthcare, I think there are two additional challenges. It starts with understanding the regulatory and reimbursement landscape, which have their own challenges. Regulatory is relatively specific. Reimbursement is incredibly broad and complex as a healthcare economics world that is constantly evolving, constantly changing, and not singular at all, meaning there are many different types of economic models within the healthcare system throughout the US, from value-based care to fee-for-service, et cetera, et cetera. And if you have that all down pat, which I would argue nobody actually does, trying to reach the right people is damn near impossible. Trying to build that network of executives, of actual decision makers is very, very challenging, very difficult. And then once you do finally have that silver bullet, trying to understand exactly which model they're working in and how do I present what they need is certainly something which many of us have fallen too many times trying to accomplish. So I think kind of, broadly, those are the three largest challenges of trying to penetrate the U.S. healthcare market.
That's great. Thanks. Perhaps we get a little bit more detailed, and maybe you could share, or someone could share on the panel, some success stories where your approach, which is obviously very innovative, ended up having a significant impact on either a healthcare organization or a startup. And
Yeah, Steve,
you can share more than one if you'd like. I'd be really curious to hear a couple different examples.
Yeah, I'd be happy to jump in. And I would say, to Avi's point also, there are a lot of synergies between the startups with the new technologies and the healthcare organizations that can actually implement those technologies. Much of it comes down to understanding how to develop the technologies into a workflow that works in the market, in the clinics themselves, for example. So as we focus on healthcare organizations, health systems, hospitals, independent practices, the focus is threefold. It's how do we improve patient care and outcomes, increase staff efficiency, and build new revenue. The challenge in many of these organizations is that they want to continue to provide quality patient care, but they don't have the resources to move the needle. Teams are overworked and understaffed. They don't feel that they have the time or finances to vet and implement new technologies. And they have too many vendors and not sure that they want to initiate the process to add another. So CalleoHealth is able to identify and vet those technologies from startups or from existing partners and bring these solutions to the healthcare market. So as an example, we have groups that have been involved in remote care management for a number of years. And once we really understood their organization's needs and workflows, we brought a competitive solution that actually costs less, integrates better with their existing workflow, and requires less resources to implement. So this has actually allowed them as a group to increase the number of patients that they service, which obviously increases revenue as well, and do so with the same staff. So for Calleo, it's not just about selling a solution, it's about bringing the right solution, but understanding how that solution is going to impact those clinics and those partners that we work with.
And to Mark's point, actually, one of our existing clients came to us maybe a year ago, a little less, with a specific challenge they had, and they needed a solution that we didn't have in-house. And our first conversation was, how do we research, who do we speak to, how do we find a solution for them, which we did. And they've now been very happy customers of this particular partner of ours, which we've now expanded into several other of our clients and customers as well. On that point, though, I think one of the things that we focused on, certainly in our early days and we continue to do, is when we start working with a young startup, among the first challenges is strategically, where do they fit into the system or into the systems, as the case may be. And often we have insight, we have knowledge, we have a lot of background, but we don't necessarily have an answer. We may have many answers, some of which may be correct, some of which might not be. So often our first approach with a new startup is to literally go out to the market and perform what we call primary market research. We interview C-levels from healthcare systems, whether it's senior living, acute hospitals, home healthcare, private practices, even insurance companies or payers as needed. And each one of them has a different perspective. Each one of them has a different thought, a different suggestion, a different strategy that might work in their system. And when you put together 10, 15, 20 of these conversations, you kind of draw a line to understand strategically, how do we fit into the global system? That will not necessarily indicate any individual conversation. But when you drill down enough and you then have that conversation with the executive as the potential client, and they explain to you their system, you have enough background, enough knowledge, enough information from the actual market to be able to have an intelligent conversation, at the very least as a starting point. Hopefully from there, the executives kind of guide you within their system to exactly what their needs are, to where it fits in their model. But that background research is incredibly helpful to really help us add that value, not only to the startup company, but maybe even more importantly, to the healthcare system that we partner with.
That's fascinating. It sounds like you have this immersive experience with your individual clients, as well as this aggregate knowledge and experience in the broader industry, in different geographies and different settings as well. I think, and perhaps you touched on this now, but maybe we could elaborate on it a bit. How would you say your CalleoHealth tailors these broad strategies and solutions to the specific circumstances and organizations that you're working with, and of course, by extension, to the needs of the patient and the different parties in the healthcare infrastructure?
So I would say from my standpoint, because we partner with great solutions and technologies, including those startups. So as we're bringing those different solutions together and vetting them, as Avi had mentioned, we can incorporate multiple solutions to develop a more robust offering for those healthcare organizations. We recently spent time on site with a group to better understand their patient demographics, the geography of the patients, because that can matter as well, the typical conditions, chronic conditions, for example, in that patient census. And then based on that knowledge, we're able to implement 3 separate solutions that integrated as one in regard to the staff workflow. So it was 3 separate solutions, but the staff was able to accomplish each of those in one set of workflows, which was certainly important to them. There's actually 2 more partners that we will implement with this practice probably in the next 60 to 90 days based on the patient outcomes from the first 3 solutions. So this allows our partners and startups to have a better exposure to a wider range of clients. It allows the practices to maximize the appropriate use of services that benefit the patients clinically and also benefit the practice financially. And those things can all go together and benefit the patient, the practice, and the startups that we work with.
Yeah, I get it. In other words, you're suggesting that the efforts that you put in and the returns create this dynamic where the sum is greater than the parts, inevitably, and then
Yes,
could be leveraged for exponential growth. Let's say. Would you say it's an accurate comment?
that's absolutely correct. Yes, I agree.
Very interesting. I'm sorry, did I just interrupt someone? Did someone want to say something?
Yeah, I wanted to add to what Mark was saying. Another thing we've kind of experienced within the healthcare ecosystem itself or within the organizations is oftentimes, I mean, they're bombarded with multiple new technology solutions coming into play. And they often take on several pilots, maybe in different departments, different divisions within a larger health system or hospital. And then oftentimes they're left with a handful of vendors managing a handful of solutions. And so what we've tried to do, like Mark kind of mentioned, is kind of streamline that process for them and be able to bring multiple solutions to the table, continue to source solutions that would better fit their growing needs, their new patient demographics or populations, or any challenges they're experiencing, and try to fit those in while working with one vendor directly. And we manage that relationship. So I think it kind of helps streamline the process and makes it a little easier for them to manage the onboarding of multiple solutions at one time.
That's great. Okay, good. Thank you. I appreciate the additional insight. So, and that's a perfect segue to my next question, actually, which is, what do you feel, and I'm asking this question to all of you, actually, and I'd like to hear different opinions, but what are the strategic insights that you have gained from your experiences, from your frontline experiences, actually, in healthcare, that inevitably guide you, whether it's procedurally or instinctively, in your decision-making process? And maybe you could elaborate on that a bit. That would be, I think very intriguing.
So I think a lot of us, we come from kind of different areas within healthcare, but, of course, we're all learning from each other and bringing our own experiences to the table. I had about a little over 10 years of experience within the U.S. healthcare system accrued before joining CalleoHealth. So some of that time was in private clinics, some of that was in hospitals and larger health systems. I was with Ochsner Health for 7 years. And it helps you understand. So you're not just coming from the outside and saying, hey, this is what you need. You really understand what people are looking for. You're understanding how decisions are made. You're understanding the barriers, the amount of buy-in and the number of people it might take to make a decision, the amount of time it might take to make a decision. That's usually the biggest one. But also just understanding, each of the different spaces within healthcare, whether it's a health system, a private practice, a post-acute area like a nursing home, assisted living facility. They each are looking at different things. They're each challenged with different things, and they're looking at different metrics. And so, sometimes there might be a solution that is relevant for both, let's say, a hospital and a nursing home, but the way that product is marketed, even priced, the metrics that it's looking at really need to be tailored to that space. And the way that the product is, again, even just the marketing of it might have to be a little bit different. And so understanding, again, how the decisions are made there, who you need to talk to. The address isn't necessarily the same across every you don't need the CEO of every single organization. And so, who to build those relationships with and what they care about. And then, some of it is even just understanding, again, the time that it takes. So, you might have a great first call with a certain organization or a certain person within the organization. And that doesn't mean that they're signing on the dotted line tomorrow. And even if they do, it might still be another close to a year before you even see revenues from that, just due to, a lot of the, we'll call it red tape, a lot of the protocols and processes to get approved within some of these organizations. So that's important to keep in mind. The other important piece here is that our chairman, who's not on the call with us today, but Dr. Jonathan Ringo, he comes from a very strong value-based care background. So our team has kind of, we've learned a lot from him, and a lot of the decisions that we make when we're vetting technologies and trying to decide if to work with certain startups, they're all, we vet internally, through us and along with Jonathan Ringo. So we really get that perspective, both of a former healthcare executive and someone who's really worked heavily within the value-based care space. So we have a strong understanding both of the fee-for-service and value-based care, to understand, the different groups that we're working with and what they're interested in. I don't know if anybody else has anything to add.
I think the only thing I'd add to that is when you look at, ultimately, I was saying for years, business is done between people, not between organizations. So as you try starting to talk to the executives, you need to really dig down into their local politics, into what drives them, what their incentives are, what actually matters to the particular executive, not to the system. There are certain things that are going to be strategic in approach, in which case you need the C-suite to get involved. There's certain things that are specifically department relevant or physician relevant, which are very different conversations. So the strategic component of understanding who you're talking to, what drives them, what motivates them, and bluntly building that relationship, I think, is so important. Without that, nothing will ever happen.
That's great. Okay, thank you. Great answers. And I think that speaks not just to what you do on a process related, but also to a certain value that sounds like is very foundational for the business and speaks to a certain level of integrity on multiple levels. Integrity, of course, from values, as well as integrity in the work ethic and in the drive. And ultimately, I would imagine that has a very positive impact on the end result, which benefits, of course, the clients and frankly, anyone involved in the broader healthcare, from the institutions to the end patient. We have a question actually from the audience, so I'm just going to read it. How significant are cultural considerations in your approach, especially when collaborating with international healthcare entities? Excellent question, by the way. Thanks for sending it in. Go ahead. Sorry. So maybe you guys want to answer that. Maybe Sarah, you can start if you like. What are your
Yeah, so I'll Dolev touched on it a little bit. I think it kind of starts for us with a little bit of our background, professional background. Some of us come from the startup space, whether consulting them or working in-house. And like Dolev mentioned, she's coming from kind of the front line within the healthcare ecosystem itself in the US. And we've all kind of worked within the US healthcare market. So I think for me, what I've learned within my experience is even if you have been an expert or worked within the profession and industry for a long time, like ourselves, and as a startup, even though maybe you have worked in a healthcare ecosystem in your country or in the US, but now you're coming from the front of bringing in new technology. You have a new idea, you innovated something, and you've spent years, decades even, or a decade even maybe, getting it to come to market. And where we've seen the challenges is a lot of time we see startups stuck in the hat of knowing their role and what they're doing, and they're really good at that. And where we come into play is we kind of use the language sometimes, we speak different languages and we speak industry language as well. So we're kind of able to talk to both sides and both parties and be able to present the picture that is beneficial to both sides. And so I think that's where we kind of bring the value in, is we kind of help bridge that gap, not only with the extensive network we have, but with the knowledge and insights and experience that we've seen, helping other startups in the past, whether, again, directly in-house or as consultants. And so we're kind of able to help bridge that gap culturally, and help both sides understand, again, what the end result and outcomes will be, benefiting the healthcare system, the patients, and everything of that nature. Dolev, I don't know if you want to add to that as well.
Yeah, I think we see sometimes that people tend to underestimate some of those cultural considerations, and especially, working with startups from other countries, speaking English isn't, the end of the story. So a lot of times we'll work with startups, their English is pretty good, but it's speaking English and speaking American and speaking healthcare industry American is not, those aren't the same thing. And so that's something that I think we really help, and that's a value that we bring to the table. We've been in conversations before where it was, us and a startup and an American healthcare organization. And we were getting text messages from the CEO of the startup during the call saying, oh, well, this was a waste of time. They're not interested. And, Avi and I were both looking at each other like, no, what are you talking about? They're very interested. This is going really, really well. And there's a lot of potential here. And that still doesn't mean that it's, a done deal. But for some reason, they were picking up on stuff completely differently than, how we were seeing it. And so, if you think about that's actually a pretty big deal. Like if we hadn't been on the call, she probably wouldn't have followed up with them. That would have been the end of it from her standpoint. And again, that can be a big deal. And I think even when we are working with American startups, so people, that are from here, grew up with the US healthcare system and are more or less familiar with it, there's still a lot of challenges that, people that come and they've got a product that maybe has applications in other industries, and then they're trying to break into healthcare, and they think that people are just waiting here with open arms and lots of money. And, as a patient in the US, it's a very expensive healthcare system. So people think that everybody here in the industry is just kind of rolling in money, and that's not the case. And so, even for American startups, I think the challenge is, we'll call it culturally, kind of the industry culture. There are nuances there that are important to understand.
I think honestly, you can go well beyond that. There are two other things I think have significant impacts in the way we approach organizations. Number one is there's a huge difference, a huge separation or disparity between the thoughts of the physicians and the thoughts of the executives. I had the opportunity this week to sit with a cardiologist, and he was explaining to me, he recently sat with an executive, and he said to the executive, oh, what's the worst thing that happens in your day? What could be the worst possible outcome? Because in my day, I kill somebody. And I said to him, you're right. You look at it from an individual patient perspective. They look at it from a broader resource perspective. And they take a look at the thousands of patients that they need to see. And if resources are going towards saving your one patient, who's very important, clearly, but you're taking away the same resources from other patients at the same time. So the scope of what you're looking at is very different. I'm not saying which is more important, but those cultural gaps, even within the organization, from a management to a provider perspective, are huge. And we need to be able to figure out how do you kind of bridge those gaps. And then on top of that, you also have mission-based organizations, things like federally qualified health clinics that have a specific mission involved, where any additional revenues that they're taking in, or a lot of not-for-profits as well, will be directed towards other opportunities to serve their mission, to serve their patients, their clients. So for them, it's not a question of driving new profits, but we have a shortage of resources for a particular area. How can we bridge that gap? Even if we don't necessarily believe 1,000% that clinically that may do what we need, if it's going to drive revenues and drive additional opportunities for us for growth, that becomes a factor. For some, it's obviously a profit-based factor, and for others, it's a mission-based factor. So you need to understand the mindset of who you're speaking to. And I think it's something we've, over the years, learned a lot more and have really become quite proficient at.
That's great. It sounds like when we use the word, and that was an excellent question. Again, thank you. When we use the word cultural considerations, it goes way beyond the standard definition of the word cultural, because it sounds like there's a lot of different cultures that you're working with that sometimes not only makes it more complex, but one culture can conflict within one culture. So I understand and appreciate and respect the maze that you help navigate. And I'm sure it's not a simple task, I think like all other challenges, having the right partners to help guide someone through ultimately helps you arrive at the correct destination in the most efficient way possibly. So I appreciate that. All right. So in the remaining 5 minutes or so that we have, perhaps I could go around and just ask each of you, if if you don't mind, what advice each of you would give to the upcoming healthcare innovators trying to make their mark. And in addition to that, what do you feel are some of the key takeaways from this conversation today? And again, I'm grateful for your time. I'll thank you again in a few minutes, but let's jump right in and maybe we'll do it in alphabetical order. Avi, you want to start with that?
I felt like I started the entire time, but sure. I think to me, one of the key takeaways is to put yourself in the position of a person who's always looking to be educated, always looking to learn, always looking to grow. And I think one of the things that we've excelled at is understanding that we don't have all the answers, that we can't come to you and say, here's the magic pill, here's the silver bullet, here's what you need to do. I think part of our mission, obviously we are a for-profit organization, but a large part of our mission is bringing better healthcare results to the market. And because of that, we're in an always learning mode. Healthcare changes literally by the day. Models are constantly changing, regulations are constantly changing. So we're constantly trying to have additional conversations. We speak to our healthcare partners, often not even pitching them on ideas, but trying to learn from them, trying to understand what their challenges are and how they see the next 12 months, the next 18 months, next 24 months, how they'll impact our existing clientele from a startup perspective, and what we should be looking for going forward. And almost more importantly, what their strategic goals in 18 months are likely to be from an organizational perspective. I think from a Caleo perspective, something I've told almost every startup we work with for a long time, we ultimately work in a process which we have to pay our bills, but we're in for the long run. So we're not looking to make a quick buck off anybody. Our goal is always to do what's best for the startup and best for the healthcare space. If we don't think that we can add real value, if we don't think that we can succeed with you, it's not worth our time or your time or resources to get involved there. So everything that we do is very much mission-based. And we try to have a good time along the way. I think it's one of the most important factors of people who are sitting next to me at this table right now are trying to really enjoy the process, have a great time together, and have a great time with our startups and with, of course, the healthcare organizations. Work hard, play hard, hopefully at the same time.
Great. Well, I appreciate your passion, values, and transparency very much. I'm sure it speaks to the winning formula. Dolev, would you like to say a few words on that?
Yeah, I'll be brief. I think just be humble. Humility goes a really long way in this industry. There's a lot of products out there that they really do have a fantastic idea, fantastic technology. Everything is, but that's simply not enough. In the U.S. healthcare system, that's not enough to just get people to sign up with you. And so I think just being humble and recognizing that it'll cost you a lot more in the long run to try to attempt to go into this alone. So finding the right partner early on, I think really can help significantly.
Great, thank you. Mark?
Yeah, and I would further what Dolev was just saying. I think from a sales perspective for startups, it can be frustrating sometimes because you have a great solution and you're just wanting to get it to the market and you're not getting the response you want. I would say the same thing for the clients that we work with. They would love to have new innovations. It can be difficult on their side as well. So I think what we can do is we can bring those best practices with all the experience that you see sitting at the table and all the different things we've done. We can help make that process a little less frustrating. Doesn't mean it won't be frustrating, but a little bit less frustrating, and try to help both sides bridge that gap.
Great, thanks. And Sarah?
Yeah, I think one of the key takeaways is, you don't know what you don't know. And I think it's important early on for startups to kind of identify the components they don't know and find the right strategic partners, whether it's advisors, consultants, people in the industry, but aligning yourself and kind of creating that community to kind of help you navigate getting you to the right place to raise the funds, to commercialize and all that. So I think those are the important things. You can be really good at what you're doing, but you're not going to know all the components to kind of make it come together. So I think it's important to kind of make those alignments early on.
Great. Well, since I said it's alphabetical and Steve is the last thing alphabetically, I'll just wrap up with a few last words. That wasn't by design, but it worked out nicely. Just perfectly segueing off of what Sarah just said, I could tell you that when we have looked at historically at investment opportunities, one of the main not one of the main data point that we really look at very carefully is who's on the team. I think it speaks the clearest to the likelihood of success. And I think that I can imagine that the companies that you work with and your clients that you work with have a significantly increased likelihood of success having you on their team as part of their team. Again, I appreciate your time. I appreciate your knowledge and experience, the transparency and the values, and most importantly, also the passion behind it, because I can imagine that, as you said, there are frustrations along the way and there are constantly moving targets and compliance issues and regulatory issues. So I think having, someone who's really on top of it and cares about it and knowledgeable can make all the difference. I appreciate your time tremendously. Thank you all and have a great day, and looking forward to speaking with you all again. Thank you. And
Thank
thank you
you.
everyone in the audience.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you,
Guys,
Steve.
have a great day,
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone.
My pleasure.
Bye.
Bye.